All right, then we'll call the meeting to order and the clerk will call the roll.
Sure. Mr. Collins,
Here.
Attorney Murphy,
Here.
Ms. Perez,
Present.
and since it's joint, I'll call the other subcommittee. Ms. Perez,
Present.
Mr. Collins,
Here.
and Denise Hurst is absent.
Okay. All right, so the agenda item is a vote to recommend to the full school committee that it enter into the interdepartmental agreement with the Springfield Police Department regarding access to school security surveillance cameras.
Thought Attorney Phelps could take us through the document and people can jump in as is appropriate.
Okay.
Thank you, Superintendent. Thanks first to the Springfield Police Department, the City Law Department for working with us to craft this interdepartmental agreement. Thanks, as always, to Bill Baker for shepherding us all through this process. This is an interdepartmental agreement between the Springfield Police Department and the Springfield School Department. If you'd look with me to the first item, the agreement is broken out between the police access to exterior cameras and police access to interior cameras. So taking up the exterior cameras first, we have periodically worked with the police department to access videos from exterior cameras. If you may recall, one of the uses of those exterior cameras when there was a murder, I think it was outside of the Berry School.
Yeah.
And that video was instrumental in apprehending the bad guy. So there's a real relationship that's helpful to the police department by our cameras and by allowing access to the cameras. So if you look at the exterior cameras provision, which is item number 1, this agreement would allow access at any time, provided that there is a good faith investigation regarding an incident or belief that there could be an incident depicted on the images and recording, and that the security surveillance camera access is needed for a bona fide law enforcement purpose, an investigation, or a criminal investigation purpose. So I think that kind of covers the instances in which the police would be requesting access to those outside images. Springfield Public Schools retains the right to reproduce the video images for the police department, the district attorney's office, law enforcement agencies, or upon court order or subpoena to third parties. So, they can access it in real, access the cameras, but that we would have the ability to reproduce the video images for court use. Maybe it would make some sense to pause here and take any questions if there are any regarding access to the exterior cameras. Since it is a past practice, this is really putting it in writing and putting it in this agreement. But I think that the new one, which has not been practiced and has not been put in practice, is access to the interior cameras in the hallways of the school buildings. So paragraph 2, live or stored recordings of images captured by the security cameras can be accessed or may be accessed only by the real-time crime analysis staff, the SPD video analyst, and or officers and supervisors responding to investigating an incident believed to be depicted upon the images and recordings. So those are the circumstances. We wanted there to be more control over access to interior cameras because of the probability that if it's during school hours, there certainly would be captured images of minors of students. There's restrictions under the circumstances where those individuals can access in real time the images. And that's in paragraph A, solely for the purpose of responding to a public safety emergency situation. That would be, you know, an intruder shooting, some type of, you know, kidnapping or other immediate threat, where I think we can all see there's a great advantage to the police department to access the interior cameras in those circumstances. B, as part of a non-emergency, which is on the second page, law enforcement investigation, provided that the Springfield Police Department receives prior written approval from Bill Baker's office to view those images. So there may be a report of a fight that occurred in the hallway, or someone believes that a teacher's purse was stolen in the hallway. The police department then, in investigating that non-emergency law enforcement investigation, would, with prior notice to Bill Baker's office and presumably then bill to the principal, be allowed to take a look at that video footage from that hallway. There, you know, it's not just a fishing expedition. There would have to be, you know, some specifics in that request and in the permission granted, that it was, you know, the central hallway, second floor, as part of an investigation regarding theft of equipment, something like that. And then the last reason why the police department could access interior images, again, is restricted to the real-time crime analysis staff, the video analyst, officers and supervisors, for the purpose of law enforcement training. So if in fact there was an active shooter training after school hours that they wanted to film or then access the film to assess how those officers were responding to such a situation, in that instance, they could do so, but again, with prior written approval from Bill Baker's office. Happy to answer any questions you may have regarding the access to interior camera footage.
I have a question, Melinda.
Sure.
The question is, are the parents being notified, or how is it going to work for the purpose of information to the filter to the community?
So in a public safety emergency situation, I think you'd have to be very careful about what types of information would be given, given the fact that there would be either an active shooter situation or something happening. I don't think in real time you could do that.
I meant not the security purpose, but to know. I know because I'm foreseeing some. I'm trying to prevent some questions that are going to come out in terms of the students in the community. So that's why, you know what I'm saying, trying to see.
Understood. So I think if the question, certainly this agreement would be put up on the, would be available as a public information. I guess the question is, as I am understanding your question is, if images of students are captured as part of a law enforcement investigation, what is the obligation of the district to inform parents?
Correct.
Okay, so in that instance, release, so it stays confidential with the police department. We can't release it to any third party without there being a request by the police department for reproduction of it, or upon court order or subpoena. If we have a court order subpoena, we don't typically inform parents. And I guess I'm trying to think, if it's part of an investigation, Mrs. Perez, I think the police department would have the ability to have that information and have it confidentially without necessarily disclosure to a parent. But I would certainly defer to any of the police officers who are here on this call with regards to whether or not, as part of a law enforcement investigation of a juvenile, it's not like the person's in custody, for which there would be Miranda rights attendant to that, or interviewing a minor where the parent would be notified. So it's a good question, and I'm just trying to think it through as you're speaking, or has posed the question.
I think, Melinda, would we treat that much like we do, like when we're screening people with our metal detectors and things? It's another tool that we use, but we're not getting permission. We just make the statement in our handbook and whatnot that this is part of our process, and that would be the notification piece.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
I mean, the image of a student on a video is not a student record, and there is a Department of Justice ruling on that. If the student's image is on a video for purposes of school discipline, it then does become a part of a student record. So if it's for law enforcement purposes, it would not be part of a student record. But Mrs. Perez, you're certainly correct that if in fact there's a dual purpose to accessing it, both for law enforcement and for school discipline, then in that instance, the parents would have to be notified because it is considered part of a student record. And I can certainly prepare a memo on that based upon the Department of Justice letter that I have.
Okay. Yeah.
To answer your question.
Thank you. Yeah, because that's my concern, and I know that that's a big question that is going to come out in terms of the student being a minor and how notification is going to go to the parents if it's a school issue. And I feel satisfied if we indicate in the handbook, without violating confidentiality of process, that this is that we're gonna be recording interiorly, and we don't have to say anything else. But it should be in the handbook. So I don't know how we're gonna handle this one. But
yeah, and I'd also point you to paragraph 4A.
Say paragraph 4 has more in terms of having the parents okay, that I guess sign off on the images. 4B is that?
Yeah, so 4A is no recorded video shall be used by the police department for any purpose other than law enforcement or response to a court order. Part B is in no event should the camera's images be released to a person or entity not a party to this agreement. So, you know, this paragraph applies to non-Springfield Police Department personnel without prior authorization, because in that instance, it's for disciplinary purposes or in a civil complaint brought by one parent against the other for the actions of a child, you would still have to have a court order or authorization to release that. I think, Mrs. Perez, your question is if the Springfield Police Department accesses images of minor kids, what is our obligation as part of a law enforcement? What is our obligation to notify parent?
correct.
Okay. Yeah. And again, I think the broad law enforcement investigation powers allows them to do it because it's not interrogation, because it's not custody, allows the police department to do that. When it spills over to being a discipline issue by the school, then it is a student record and requires parent authorization. but I can clarify that in a memo.
Would
Thank
this
you.
be similar, Melinda, to when we've had to notify parents when we've, in the court cases, when we've had to give information to like the opposing counsel, we've gone, through entire classrooms, that type of situation?
Yeah, for that, it's prospective. We're going to be releasing this. Here's the notification. If you have an objection, you need to notify us. What's different about, I think, about this agreement is it clearly, at least as to A, if there's an emergency situation, you can't notify. And I think everybody accepts that. Do we have to notify afterwards? Well, you'd probably be notifying parents anyway that this occurred, that an incident occurred. Then the question is, if it's not an emergency, but it's for law enforcement, is part of your prior written notice, does that include notice to the parent, Bill?
The prior written, well, when we've done it before, it's been noticed to the parents that we've had to furnish the courts and other attorneys with their child's information for the cases. I'm thinking if these documents were to be used in a case, then that's when we would, at that point, but during that process, I would think it would fall under the same rules. We don't do any notification until it needs to be done because there's no real point in doing it.
Right, because it's been held confidentially up until that point.
Yes.
So we can send you a copy of that form too, Ms. Perez. I'll attach it to the memo so that you can see how the notification goes.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. Mindy, an additional question.
Yep.
The advent of this video technology is now really progressing rapidly, especially if you've had a chance to see any of the court proceedings that have gone on this week. Lots of videos being used in court. If there was an active intruder or some type of event in school where this video becomes part of evidence, and it's possible that could.
Sure.
The police officers who are on the call, do you have the technology to blur any facial image of and like children's faces or anything, if that was going to be used as evidence?
Is that directed to the police department?
Yes, or
Yeah,
whoever.
we absolutely have redaction software, but most of the times when we actually do redaction is for Freedom of Information Acts for crimes. When we send video to the DA's office, we send unedited, unredacted video. It's up to them to decide what they redact depending on the case. But when we get video, if we give it to anyone but the DA's office, we absolutely redact juveniles from the video.
And we do not
But
have that.
so you do have the ability to do it, right?
Yes, absolutely.
So, and maybe I'm being overly cautious, but I would think that any video that goes to even to the DA, if it has a potential of being used in open court, that we would redact faces of juveniles if they're not the subject of it.
We don't have the capability to do that.
No, the police, that's why I asked the police if they did, and he
Sure.
said he does.
Okay, got it.
That's why I asked the question of the people from the police department.
So what role do we play in that responsibility, Chris?
Well, that's what I'm trying to talk it through. They have the ability, correct? Is that what I heard you say?
The police department has the ability to redact video.
So Mindy, we would need to work with the DA's office and the police department. I'm sure the police department doesn't want to tell the DA, hey, we're going to be giving you redacted video when they don't typically do that. And I don't blame them. But we may have to say that, look, the image of any student would have to be redacted if they're not, if this tape is going to be used in evidence and they're not the subject of whatever the case is.
So I believe there's already laws and case law in regards to that, because we've been dealing with redaction for a while. If the child is not involved in it, in any of the crimes, I'm pretty positive. I mean, you can confirm confirm with the DA's office, but they're gonna redacting those images automatically.
Yeah, they have an obligation to do that.
Okay, just wanted to make sure because I can see it happening eventually as we get more and more technology.
Well, if I
Yeah,
could just chime in for one moment, I mean, I think that the DA's office has to have access. If they're investigating a crime and there's a potential witness, they need to have access. And I think the deputy chief is correct that, you know, down the road, they can work with the police department and the DA's office to shield any juveniles' exposure to the press or anyone else. But for purposes of investigation, I think they need to see who was in a potential crime scene.
Correct.
Yeah, you're clarifying exactly what I was saying, Peter. We're on the same wavelength, that if it gets into open court, that any child's image that is not subject of the court proceeding would be redacted. But yeah, no, I understand they need it. I agree with you. Other than that, I'm fine with it. It's been a long time working and a long time coming. Thank you, COVID. So if there are no further questions, then a motion to recommend this to the full committee for a vote would be in order.
So moved.
Second,
Thank you. Terry, would you call the roll?
Sure thing. Mr. Collins,
Yes.
Attorney Murphy,
Yes.
Ms. Perez,
yes,
and then from Legislation and Contracts, Ms. Perez,
yes,
Mr. Collins,
Yes.
and Denise Hurst is absent.
Thank you.
Thank
And
you.
that's the only item on the agenda.
Thanks, guys.
We do have another meeting, so you're just gonna stop the recording. Is that the way it is?
I am going to stop it right
So could I have a
now.
motion to adjourn this meeting, please?
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Great
I
guys.
think
Yeah.
Take care.
Peter made a
Wait.
motion. Would you call the
Peter-
roll, Terry?
Okay, Mr. Collins,
Yes.
Mr. Murphy,
Yes.
Ms. Perez,
yes,
Legislative and Contracts, Ms. Perez,
yes.
Mr. Collins,
Yes.
and Denise is absent.
Thank you. Thank you,
Thank you, guys.
everybody, for participating.
Bill
Thanks a lot,
Schwartz, I'll be in
Deputy
touch
Chief.
tomorrow.
Thank you.
Bill.
The other officers who are on there.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Guys.
All right,
Thank you.
take care.
Folks for building and maintenance are going to stay on, right?